Often decisions that you make along the way as you're making decisions about the garments that you're going to create. Now, it can be also that you are working with commercial patterns, and you are going to make designs about how you might want to embellish it. Do you want to add a seam? Do you want to create a particular rhythm within the garment? All of those things are part of how you choose to use principles of design. Now, not all of these principles are present in all the garments. All right, repetition. Repetition is the repetition of details. And we've already seen some of that with some of the pieces that we've looked at, like the repetition here of this line. It's repeated and makes it work. Once, maybe doesn't quite work, because it's like, well, so what else is there? And then how you choose to repeat these particular features. We often see repetition that happens in a way that creates a rhythm in a garment. And I'll tell you who does this really beautifully is Del Pozo. I've been really interested in some of these Del Pozo garments. If you watch the news at all, you might have noticed that Melania Trump got off the plane in Israel in this dress. Yeah. And this is a lot of different design features going on. We can come back to these as we go forward. But this one particularly, you can see the repetition. But it's also note that the width of the stripes, the space in between this narrow blue stripe, the black pulls it in, and how the garment, the repetition has a rhythm to it, but also the whole garment has a rhythm. And this is not necessarily repetition, but it is a good example. It's a nice example of silhouette in the sleeves of it. This is a nice. So that's another good example. Here is another version of the same sense of the use of line and the repetition of the lines. Now again, you'd say, well, I don't use for a garment like that. I mean, where am I going to wear a long thing like that? But this on the end of a skirt would be beautiful. Imagine a skirt just from here down. You could so easily do this with your blue dress if you wanted to. I mean, it's just a way to use it.
Yeah, a short skirt.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, and these tops are quite beautiful. And we'll come back to these, talk about these things later, so you can look at them as they go around. Now, as these are coming around, can you give this one to Mary Jo to hold up, would you please? And would you hold this one up? And I'll hold these two up. These are all from the same Del Pozo collection. This is an example. If you look through here, you can see the repetition in the garments, but you can also see how that repetition is used across the collection.
That one too, the one we just passed on.
Yeah, which is, this one.
It's the same as this.
Yeah.
In a different proportion.
Right, yeah. And these all came off of, I think I got these off the Del Pozo website, but I also got them from Vogue.com too, I think some of them. But you can sort of see how this, for instance, is extremely wearable. I could imagine many of us feeling quite elegant in something like that. It's quite beautiful. And also too, these things, if you look at these, you could say, well, I'm probably not likely to wear that jacket. But look and see how the dark silhouette with the lighter pants and this shape, it's not straight across. It has a kind of curve to it, which keeps it looking like you went through that thing they saw bodies in half. Okay, so now gradation is, if you think of ombre fabric that goes from light to dark, that's a gradation. But also gradation can be a repetition of lines, and a couple of these Del Pozo start with wide lines to narrower to really narrow. That's gradation also. And but colored gradation has a sense of moving smoothly from one to the other. Not easy off to achieve. Now this, I saw this in threads, and I realized, having tried to do gradation like this with beading, I know how hard it is to make the gradation even, so it flows from one to the other, so you don't have, it doesn't look like color blocking. It's a challenge. And I saw this jacket, and I thought this jacket really was, I just Xeroxed it, so you can, I thought this was really beautiful. I think it's a quilted piece. It's silk dupioni. There's a description.
It's gorgeous.
But I thought this woman did just a beautiful job of making this gradation. Now the question is, do we want to go from light to dark or dark to light? I think that depends on how you sort of, what catches your eye. And then also where you put those stripes have a lot to do with, you wouldn't want to have a white dress and a giant black stripe around your hips if you sort of feel like that might be an area that you might want to give less volume to. So you can sort of see. But the gradation here is really beautiful. This is another example of gradation that I thought, this is a Catherine Bren coat, and this is from Vogue, and here's an article on making it. Is this gradation? It doesn't necessarily go from light to dark or dark to light, but they're different. The gradation comes from here. Now, this is Molly Flanagan wool. If you ever want to try this, you can. Pearl Soho. You can also get these from Molly Flanagan's website, I think. I think it's Molly Flanagan. Oh, Mary Flanagan, sorry. But when I pass this around, take a look at here and you really do see the gradation. And Pearl Soho as a whole, I mean, this stuff has been sitting, I look at Pearl Soho and I look at these all the time, and I just think, I really just want to buy that. I just want to buy a couple of those cuts. Well, it's kind of expensive. And just have them just sitting around just because I think they're beautiful. But anyway, this is a nice example of that, and I think that. And this is another gradation that I think some of you may have tried. It's two different fabrics, but it sort of pushes the use of lines, pushes the angles, but also the darker brings this forward, since this is the back. This is the back. It's however you choose to look at it, but look at the gradation of this half to this half. And look at the balance, this is a nice example of balance. Huh?
Marcy Tilton's.
Yes, I think this is a Marcy Tilton, yes. Well, it doesn't say so here. Usually they say right here that it is. But if you look here, you can see the style lines. This might be a time to pause that if you're looking, let's do it with the next one. We'll do it with the next one. Okay, so pass that around. Okay, radiation, lines that radiate out, like a sunburst, or and this I thought is a really great example. This dress you really can't see it on the copy here. Some of you may recognize this pattern from Vogue. But look at the technical drawing. It's a great example of use of seam lines and radiating seam lines, and quite beautifully placed on the body, I think. I mean, I just think this is a really, and also too, if you hold it up like this, you can see the silhouette.
No.
You can't. You can't. Well, when you get it, hold it up to the light. Yeah, and you can see the silhouette, and it obscures the back. But the silhouette is really clear. Anyway, but this is a nice. I think this is a really beautiful example of. I think this may be out
They're
of.
very easy, very
This may be out of print, but you know what? Just Google the number, and you probably can find it somewhere.
They were recently having a sale on their out of print patterns. I don't know if it's still there, y'all know.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know if it's still going on, but.
And I think this is an interesting. I would never choose to do that, but I think if I made this dress, I probably would do it just to break out of my But again, this is what I wanted to pause and say, that very frequently, the thing that I really look at are the flat, what they call the fashion flats, or the technical drawings, which is this. And the most interesting part of Vogue magazine, Vogue Pattern magazine, I find is, I think a lot of the clothes are made up. I think they're really unsophisticated. What they're the way they're made up, and the fabric choices, and I think, who would wear that stuff? But if you go in there and you look at the design, that you could say, wow, that has really beautiful lines. I could do something more interesting with that than what I don't discount it as readily, I think. So there we are. So this is really quite nice. Oh, send these two together. There we go. Now, oftentimes when you have an all-over garment, whether it's an all-over design, but I'm thinking particularly, let's just say for lack of, for just for discussion, that if you have like a complete white garment, or in this case, these examples are a whole set of garments that are in neutrals, that you can use contrast to break up the flatness of an all-over garment. And the coat with the black lines on it, on the pockets, on the sides, is a good example of using line to do that. That's a really nice example of contrast. Now, also, you look at all these Del Pozos. He really does contrast beautifully. He contrasts the different colors, and I think this is, and the choice of colors and the way these colors work together. And this is one of the things I think is really interesting. And he probably might not have done this had it not been all one click. If you look at this, you can see that contrast, that one black line in this dress. Isn't that interesting? Even if it stands by itself without anything else in the collection, because in the collection you can see it makes such good sense if you put it in the collection, because it's really part. This is how you look at the whole collection has a unity and has an aesthetic, and you can see the repetition of things. But even this garment in and of itself, remember, people don't wear the whole collection at once. But this, you can see that one black line, what it does to the. Now we'll talk about proportion later, but it works because it's at a particular place in the garment. Not too high, not too low, not so high that it breaks it in half. It's at the bottom third. What is it?
Proportion.
Yeah, proportion, exactly. And some of that's related to what do you call that?
The golden rule?
Yeah, the golden rule. Yeah. So, yeah. So, but I do think this is a really nice example of that. Now, these came out of, do you all look at Vogue patterns? Do you all look at, they do these things where they have whole wardrobes made out of one pattern. And some of these are really nice. And this one I thought was particularly nice. Maybe because I always like these neutrals, but when I go and I try them on in the store to see if I really want to make them, I decided I don't really like how I look in these colors. Which then brings me to something else that I'll say right now, is that if you fancy something and you're not sure, or before you invest a lot of time and money in good quality fabric to make the thing, and you're not sure, go somewhere and look for a garment that's similar and go try it on. And don't pick the cheap ones, pick the high end highest end garment you can find in the style you're looking at, because it's well made, it's well balanced, and try it on and see if you like it. I thought, I always fancied these wrap dresses that people wear, the Diane von Furstenberg, those wrap dresses, and people wear them, and I always think they look really nice, and I wanted to I thought, well, maybe I really do want to make one of these. And so I went and tried one on, and I thought, I really don't like this. I don't really feel good in it. It doesn't seem to, I don't know. So let's discard. I think I must have done it 5 different times, tried, and then I just said, okay, I'm not wasting my time making this because it's not a garment that I particularly feel good in. And then sometimes I'm thinking, I really ought to get away from all the solids I like to wear and sort of push the boundaries and do some prints. So I go try on prints and I go, ah! Okay, so here's a great texture one that comes around.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you hold that up, and I'll hold. Let's do this one first. See the contrast here? It's not high contrast because they're sort of in the same, it's the beige and then the off-white. So it's not like black and white. It's not like, what was the Del Pozo fuchsia and cream, or navy blue and red, but it's more subtle. And then you flip this over, here's just another version of this. We could debate whether we think this is a nice line, but mostly just look at the garments and see the use of contrast. And not high contrast, but contrast nonetheless. Okay? This is also an article. This is an article I pulled from I think Vogue too. Yeah, Vogue, and it's about color. Color. It's really about color blocking, which is almost always contrast. So you look at these things and say, I actually love these colors. I mean, love these high contrast. My house has a lot. Those of you who've been in my house, you know, it's a high contrast between black and light colored wood floor, and I have black kitchen counters, and you know, so you know, I like high contrast, and so it catches my eye. So okay, now harmony. Harmony is the opposite of contrast. Think of it that way. But it's also how things work together, and there's a sort of similarity throughout the garment, even though there's difference within the garment. And the designer that probably does harmony better than anybody is Armani. And I'm such an Armani fan. So I put this together for us because I thought it is such beautiful, beautiful harmony, these garments. Harmony of color, harmony of line, but mostly it's the color and the fabrication and how, and if you look at it individually, you can see that there is, if you take this for instance, here, clearly there's contrast there, but the harmony of this top and these pants and the contrast makes it work beautifully together, I think. Same thing here. This, take a look at that if you want to see something with some beautiful, how things work together. But this garment, let me see, which one is it? This is in a collection. If you look at these three here, how there's a definite harmony there, a definite sense of things working together, and you can sort of get carried along in the sort of story of that garment, or the set of garments here. And then the same thing with this blue. I adore. I thought I might wear that see-through top, you know. It's just beautiful. Okay. All right. So you may not get so over the top as I am about it, but there's so much to be learned from these garments. If you look at the silhouettes, look at the line, look at the contrast, look at the repetition within, you can see all of it. How he uses texture in really subtle ways. Take a look at this jacket, those of you that are interested in sleeves. I just think it's a really beautiful sleeve right there. So, all right, balance. Balance is the idea that we can mirror right and left, like lapels are a classic of symmetrical balance. They're both same. You can also have balance in terms of button spacing. and very often those buttons, as I talked about with in the shirting program, that the buttons can be evenly spaced, or you can break them up so you have them spaced out differently. But also balance can be about the overall balance of asymmetrical elements. This here, this looks like a pretty symmetrical garment. Well, in fact, it's really quite asymmetrical. And you can see the hem and this part of it. The silhouette itself, look at the silhouette, is pretty balanced except for that. The challenge is with, if you choose to make a garment that's asymmetrical and you want to push that asymmetricality, the challenge is how all of that works together, and this idea of how you balance size and scale. And I thought these two, guess who, Armani, examples, take asymmetricality and push the scale of it and make them work quite beautifully. This jacket with this, first of all, you just have to be so impressed with the cut of the garment and the drape of the garment. I mean, and then how this beautiful curve works down here, but the bow on top, I think, is just the thing that, and it's not too big, it's not too small. If it's too small, it looks like an afterthought. The angle of it, it's not too much balance this way, it's not too this way, is that you get the angle has to be right, and it's not that the margin of error there is pretty. It doesn't take much to get it so it doesn't look right. So that's, and then if you can see this same kind of idea, but these are pleats as opposed to a cascade of a curve. But these little pleats and the curve, if you look at the curve of the hemline along with the cuff, all of these elements are balanced together, and this creates a beautiful, I think, asymmetry. Again, nice texture here. Now, the challenge of this is, well, how do I do this if I'm a home sewer and I'm making my own garments? Well, again, do some research. Get on Pinterest while you're having your morning coffee. Spend 20 minutes just going through. Set a clock. Debbie said, "Oh my God, I just get so lost in Pinterest." Were you the one who said that? It just keeps going. It just
It's a black hole.
Yeah, it's a black hole. So what you do is because you just keep following and going on and on and on, you get deeper. So my advice is set a timer for 20 minutes and just go through and scan through, pick up things that you're interested in and put them where you're going to put them, save them, and so you find you see a lot of things, and you see this and you go, wow, that's interesting to me. And I think that then as you're sewing, when you're working on your muslin, if you don't have a dress form and you really are serious about sewing, invest in one. Because it becomes your design space. Your dress form becomes your design space. So if I'm doing something like this, I get the muslin and then I start putting on the elements. I make the elements and I put them on. And I pin them on my dress form. And normally I'm working on other things or I'm still thinking about it. And I leave it there so when I walk in the door, that's the first thing I see is that dress form with that garment on there. And if I walk in the door and I go, I change it. Because there's something about it that's not right. You know, and I don't throw it away immediately. I tweak it, and then I go away, and then I come back an hour later, and it looks better. I do that with fabrication. I do that when I'm testing seams. When I'm making garments, I do several seams to see the stitch length and how it responds to the interfacing. And then I just pin those up on my dress form because they're hanging on the body and they're hanging over the curves. And so when I walk in, I go, oh my God, that one's ripply. That's a no. And then I write on them. So I just sort of, the design process takes, as you get, I'm not your sort of make it tonight, sew it tonight, wear it tomorrow kind of sewer. Although, there's a time for that too. So gradually I have sort of begun to educate my eye, and the process gets shorter and shorter. And I can take you through a design process of that Linton coat that I made if you are interested. Okay, so there's that. So also just revel in the contrast, the fabrics, the surface texture here with the satin. This is satin, but this isn't. This is flat. This is satin. This looks like it has some sort of texture in the fabric. Check out the pleats here. These are radiating. I mean, there's so much beautiful stuff going on in these garments to revel over. Okay, the last thing is proportion, and that's kind of what we were talking about with balance. Is not balance is balancing symmetrical and asymmetrical elements, and how the garment works from left to right and top to bottom, and how proportion is really how you visually relate everything together. Debbie's first question about, well, is silhouette the first thing you look at, or do you look at something else? The idea there is that's really a kind of in a way, sort of a question of proportion, is how the whole garment works together and how it kind of creates its own sort of aesthetic. And it is that I think is the most difficult thing to achieve. Is the length right? I mean, when I was working on this jacket design, somebody in the design workshop at Apparel Arts that I was in said, I think you should shorten that an inch. I mean, an inch doesn't seem like a big deal. I tell you, I did. Took my muslin, I took off an inch. I couldn't believe the difference that it made. It just all of a sudden made it look more lively. It took it away from pulling down. And it's a thigh. Some of you saw it at Couture. But anyway, I think this is a Dior. I picked this one just because it's a great example of balance that's really hard to achieve, and we can sort of debate whether you think it does it. But I picked it because it's a Dior from the year that I was born, 1948. Isn't it adorable? I just think it's so adorable. And again, it has high contrast. You see where my eye gets drawn to?
And it's short too.
Yeah, it has this long skirt. And if you look closely when it comes around, you'll see the buttons. It's got buttons down the front. 1, 2, 3, 4 widely spaced buttons down the front. And then it's got these buttons and this shape. So you've got vertical, horizontal, you've got curved lines. The sleeve is just the diagonal here. I mean, it's just really fun. Anyway, that was why I picked that one. Now, this, I found this in Vogue, and I was so impressed. This is a blogger. This is a woman blogger. I think one of the reasons that I wanted to do this presentation, and because we've been sort of thinking about these things, is how do you develop your own aesthetic? Rather than just, I'll do one of those and one of those and one of those and one of those. Nothing goes together. You sort of, occasionally we make things that are so on trend just because you want to have it. And it sits out there. But it's not part of your collection of your life garments. And part of the way that you develop your aesthetic is by refining the things that catch your eye. And not that you have to be rigid. I'm sort of, personally, I'm not a proponent of sort of these kinds of rules. You only should wear these colors, or you should only wear these shapes because you have this body. I think you should push out of that. And it might be, if you go in my wardrobe and you looked in there, you would see a kind of range of colors. And I think if you think back to the shirts I brought, you could sort of say, well, she certainly does gravitate to this direction. But that doesn't mean that I don't swing out the other side and wear something that is so not, part of the things that I gravitate to. I'm just sort of like drawn to colors. It's like Marie says, she's a magpie. She's like drawn to shiny things. Somebody gave me some fabric and I'll never sew it. It's not the thing I'm drawn to, but she's the beneficiary of it. So there are things you don't. But anyway, I was so impressed with this woman and her. I think this is an article about a travel wardrobe. She's a blogger, but if you look at her, this is her here. I mean, there's styles there. She has a whole sense of how she's not overdone. She doesn't sort of scream designed.
She dresses her age too.
Exactly, which is why I sort of visited her. And that's why I like 50 dresses, because she's our vintage. But here's all of these. I don't think she's great in this, but she looks like she's off to, ride a horse. But she may have been. She's traveling, Those of you that travel a lot, Cheryl, you can sort of, there are times you do have to look like that because you do. But just look at the sort of decisions that she makes for herself. And I think there's a color story here because she's traveling, is what I think. I didn't read the article. I just like the pictures. I suppose I'm probably the only academic that occasionally just doesn't want to read. So, and I'm so visual, but also look at the sort of choices that she makes about her. I mean, she knows she has one beautiful long neck. Yeah, and so and here, those of us that are thinking about tunics, here I think she's got her tunic going for her. But anyway, just sort of look at this as somebody who has a sense of who they are and how pieces work together. There are these articles for those of you that feel you need to have kind of a place to start. Sometimes it's just, if you don't have an art background or you've never thought about these issues, you're coming to sewing late in life, there are things that are helpful. And just because it says, if you have this body type, you should wear these things, well, start there, but that doesn't mean you should only do that. And don't be a slave to what somebody else tells you should do. And allow yourself to be seduced by something that's kind of really outside of the boundaries. This article, both of these articles are by a woman named Bridget Reyes. Anybody know her? This one is Styles Sewing That Flatters. And she just sort of goes through these various, if you have hips and thighs, wear these things. If you have abdominal tummy stuff, wear these things. And so they're things to think about. That's all I can say. Things to think about. This is a similar article. Things that elongate, things that shape, and so they're useful to read. Put the information in the data bank, pull it out when you need it, but don't be a slave to it. Now this is Vogue, as you know, always has those little shapes that you can coordinate patterns to. They can at least sort of, if you're not sure because your eye's not trained enough, allow that to assist you. Now, this is, here are two croquis, and they're really useful for you to kind of sketch your own. If you see a silhouette that you like, but you want to bring it down. You can make these bodies look like you very easily, but they're useful. And then you can get a sense of what this is about understanding your horizontal and your vertical lines. But they're all just sort of there for help. But like I say, don't become a slave. Now, this next thing I'm going to show you is she's a Polish designer, and she designs these jackets made out of ultra suede. And they are beautiful examples of contrast, line. Silhouettes are very similar, and repetition, and there's not a lot of texture in them, but you can easily see the silhouettes and the lines. The silhouettes tend to be similar, but what I find so compelling about this is is I put all of these together from several different places. What I find so compelling about this is this artist's clear aesthetic point of view. She has a very clear aesthetic. She knows what she wants to do, and there are 14 jackets, and every one of them is different. If you look at them, you'll see the subtle differentiation. You seen these? Her name is Teresa Maria Wooduk. She's a Polish artist. But I just think, I think there's something so admirable about this. It just so catches my eye. And here's her picture on the back. And she has a long history of doing she's a painter, she's done architecture, she's done all kinds of things. But anyway, I just think these are really beautiful, and there's so much to be learned by this if you take these sort of features and you look at them. Okay.
Is that her own pattern? Does she sell it or how?
She sells those jackets.
Oh, the jacket.
She sells the jackets. Yeah, you can find them. I stumbled first on them in a catalog, and I
What's
pulled.
the name of the line, do you know?
Excuse me.
They're so pretty.
Oh, Yantar. Yantar.
Why?
Yeah, limited. And sort of talk you through our design process. But before we do that, do you all have questions or things you want to talk about?